Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Clint Ober is the innovator behind the grounding movement and CEO of Earth.FX Inc., a research and development company located in Palm Springs, California. So a series of seemingly unrelated yet highly synchronistic events dating back to his early childhood led Clint to a groundbreaking discovery that many have called the most important health discovery of all time. Grounding, if you haven't already heard about it, has now become a massive international movement, causing people to shed their shoes and reconnect electrically to the Earth's surface. Over the past 20 years, he's supported over 20 research studies, and I believe they're peer-reviewed, available through the Earthing Institute, that collectively demonstrate that grounding reduces inflammation and promotes normal functioning of all body systems. It's like an amazing supplement that you just can't buy. And I recently watched your amazing new, not yet released documentary film. It's called The Earthing Movie. Look out for it, and I might even include it in the show notes if I'm allowed, which I believe was even the winner of the Audience Choice Award for the Best Documentary Film at the 2019 Dances with Films Festival in Hollywood. So this actually is all about the fascinating true story and the impressive science behind the awe-inspiring discovery of grounding. So, Clint, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ali. I really thank you for the opportunity to be on your show and share.
Your story is absolutely fascinating, and I want to dig right in. And perhaps you could just explain how, I guess, your life unfolded to, for you to discover grounding for humans and the necessity of it. And perhaps even while you do that, maybe explain to us what grounding is, because if you do a Google search on grounding, you get all these different definitions that are a bit confusing. Some people actually say that grounding is all about just getting in the present moment. So right. maybe you can clear that up for us, and maybe even give us some other words like earthing or whatever else, but fire away.
Okay. I never know for sure where to start, so I usually start at the beginning, and then and I ask you to please pull me back to stay on point if I get too far off course here. Basically, I grew up in Montana and more or less a cowboy, and I spent 30 years in the communications industry, and primarily in the cable television development of the cable industry, and building out cable systems. And in that industry, everything has to be grounded to the earth. And it's like everything in your home is connected to a ground system that is connected to a ground rod or grounding system for your home. So every refrigerator, computer, anything that has a 3-prong plug is grounded. The chassis is grounded, and meaning that it's at earth potential, so that to prevent, accidental electrical event or noise, static, all kinds of things. But anyhow, I spent about 30 years in that industry, and I ended up in about 1994, 95. I ended up with a major health issue where I had some dental work done, and ended up with an abscess in my liver. And through that process, I got, it was a very challenging thing. It's in the movie, and I think that you are going to be able to send the movie out free to all of your listeners and followers. But anyhow, it kind of, before that time, I was heavily involved in the material world. They go out and make money playing King of the Mountain with all the other 40, 50-year-old guys. And but anyhow, it was a very serious health disorder. And when I recovered from it, and they didn't expect me to recover when I first started. And so, but after I recovered, I kind of looked at life a little differently. I realized that, death, it's real, and it's something that will eventually happen. And so I was kind of displeased with myself at that time, because I'd spent all my whole life, about building business, creating wealth, and collecting things. And when I recovered from that, I was laying around the house one day and I looked around and I said, I've never really owned all of these things that I owned. I said, they really own me because you acquire them and then you spend your life taking care of them. Houses, cars, art, you name it. And so I just kind of had an epiphany that I just wanted to let go of everything. And that particular day, that I remember looking out the window and everything was just a little more vibrant, energetic, and I just went through this big shift and big change. So I let go of everything that I owned. I sold it, gave it away, gave it to my kids, whatever. And then I went on, bought a small RV. I went from a 5,000 square foot hay frame home on the mountain in Evergreen to an RV, but it was fun. So anyhow, I spent about 4 years running around the country, just pretty much living in national parks and RV parks, nice ones. And I ended up spending some time down in Key Largo on the Bayside. And one night I had this feeling that I needed to go back west. I needed to go back to work, but I didn't know what it was, but something I wrote down on a piece of paper that, to become an opposite charge. And to me, that would mean to go out and poke people, stir them up, get them excited. And then also the second note was status quo is the enemy. Had no concept of what it meant, but this is an intuitive thing. And so I ended up slowly going back to California. Wasn't happy there. Went to Arizona and ended up in, of all places, Sedona. I was on my way to Flagstaff and pulled into Sedona late at night and woke up in the morning. I said, I might as well stay here. It's as pretty a place as I've ever been. And but anyhow, while I was there, I started working with. I was kind of retired, but I was working with a bunch of art galleries and stuff, doing special lighting and things for them for their main shows and stuff. But anyhow, one day I was working on a computer and it kept crashing. And the computer, so I went and I checked the outlet. The computer wasn't grounded and the outlet wasn't grounded. So I fixed up a ground and put a piece of copper tape across my desk so I would touch the copper tape to ground myself before I touched the computer. And so I fixed that. But anyhow, shortly after that, I walked outdoors and there was a big tour bus pulled up, and it was full of young. I think they were from Japan, and they all had these white tennis shoes on. They all looked somewhat the same, but the white tennis shoes was so obvious that it drew my attention. And again, I had an intuitive hit. I wondered if loss of contact with the earth, loss of grounding, could have anything to do with our health. I didn't know, and I'm not even sure why I asked the question, other than I'd been working with some static electricity. And so that night I went home and I got a roll of, first of all, I started measuring the electric fields and the static electricity on our bodies when we're insulated from the earth versus when we're on the earth. And so I recognized there was a real I don't know if it was a problem. At that time, I couldn't call it a problem. There was something significant going on here that I don't think anybody was aware of.
And Clint, sorry to interrupt there. You said you started measuring the EMF. How were you actually measuring that?
Well, the EMF, EMF electric fields are very simple. You just take because there's at 60 hertz. So you take an AC, just a regular voltmeter, set it on AC, ground it to the earth, and then take the black probe would go to the earth and the red probe would go to, just hold it between your fingers. And then as you get closer to a lamp or closer to the electrical wires in your walls, especially at the head of your bed, you have all of these electrical wires. So when you hold so you can see the voltage go up and down. It's proximity. The closer you are to an electrical wire, the higher the electric field. The further away, it dissipates and drops down. And so it's relatively easy to measure. But the magnetic field is a whole different thing. But the electric field seemed to be more the active agent than the magnetic portion. But anyhow, so that's how I measured it. It was very simple. And then static electricity, you can kind of do the same way. Just set it on DC, your meter on DC. And for 60 hertz, you set the meter on AC. And for static electricity, you put it on DC. Then all you have to do is raise your foot up off the floor. And you can see that if it's on carpet and you have a rubber shoe on, then the static charges will spike. And that doesn't occur when you're standing barefoot on the earth. So static electricity is a big issue, a bigger issue than anybody knows, but it's too challenging to explain it to everybody. So I kind of leave it alone. But there is a whole industry called the ESD industry, electrostatic discharge industry. And so any factory, any clean room, any where they handle gasoline, dynamite, if you're going to operate on somebody, you have to ground them to eliminate the static electricity. Everything has to be at earth potential to prevent static charge, because static charge can, start a fire or can create an electrical vent in the heart. If you open the skin and you have a lot of surgeon who would have a lot of static electricity, for instance. So, but anyhow, the kids play with static electricity because they go shock each other. And but it's a very real thing, and it's a very unnatural thing to have static charge on your body, and it's unnatural to have electric field charges on your body. These are just parts of our modern society, our modern culture. The thing that's interesting, in my first study that I did in Ventura, California, we had like 60 people in that study, and 30 of them were grounded, 30 of them were not, and it was all blinded. And so when we went out, and because I was the one doing the installations, and I knew which ones were grounded and I knew which ones weren't, but the people, the people doing the actual study work were not aware of the candidates or who was and wasn't. But anyhow, so I remember one day I went to a person's house, and I measured the electric fields. They had huge electric fields in the bedroom, and this lady had severe arthritis, and she could barely use her hands, and she was in her late 60s. And I remember, but anyhow, so we put there's more to the story, but we put a grounding mat in the bed under the sheet, and then had him sleep on it for 30 days. And then, but she had a high electric field, and I thought, wow, this is good. We're going to get really good results on this person because we're reducing the electric fields down by 95%. Then I went across town in Ventura to install another subject. Went into that bedroom. He had no EMFs whatsoever because he had no electrical devices in his room except for one lamp. It was an adobe house, no wiring in the walls. And it was a concrete floor, and the bed was metal frame touching the concrete floor, so it was naturally kind of grounded. But he had a similar situation to the lady I'd grounded earlier. Lots of inflammation, flaring inflammation, lots of cardiovascular issues, respiration issues. And so I said, well, it's unfortunate that he didn't get a grounded mat. The other lady did. I knew it, he didn't know. And I was thought it's too bad. And so I went on about my work. And about a month later, when they collected the results from these people, and I was kind of perusing them one day, I noticed that both of these individuals had the same benefit from grounding. I mean, they had reduced inflammation, reduced arthritic flaring inflammation. Their complexions, their demeanors were much improved. They had significant reduction of pain and so on. And I thought, this can't possibly be because this person didn't have any electric fields. And that was the first day that I realized that there was a counter. I mean, there was something else. There's another mechanism of action here, and it wasn't electric fields alone. So I went on, and then I measured electric fields, measured a magnetic, by modifying the cords and doing different things. You can expose somebody to an electric field without the magnetic field and vice versa. And what we found was that, and then we put, I hate to get technical, capacitors in the line, so there would be no electron flow, just an energy flow from the Earth. And what we found was that the only thing that reduced inflammation was grounding to the Earth. Reducing the electric field didn't reduce inflammation. Reducing the magnetic field didn't reduce inflammation. Putting a capacitor in didn't reduce inflammation. And that was quite profound for us to learn that, because even in the electrical industry, in the communications industry, the reason we ground is to prevent noise, to prevent interference, electromagnetic interference. It's called EMI, electromagnetic interference. And so my mind had, and to prevent lightning and electrical events. So I always had more of that view of things. And that's what made me look at the EMFs and all of these things. But anyhow, so a year later, we began another study. And this was where we just measured cortisol. But anyhow, so what I did is conclusively determined that the grounding, being in contact with the Earth and the body becoming, rising or, to Earth potential, meaning it had the same electrical potential of the Earth. There's no charge difference. They're identical, meaning that the negative surface charge of the Earth, the body has the same negative surface charge as the Earth itself, just like standing barefoot on the Earth. So that was my new premise. And so I went forward from that point on, and I kind of put the electric fields and all that off my plate. There is a story there, and they are a problem, but they're not the problem that everybody thinks they are. They're not the issue where they're not going to cause MS. They're not going to cause all of these health disorders that everybody claims. What they do is they subtly stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. And that's not a problem for most people, because most people are not affected by them. That's because, but the people who are affected by these electric fields, they're suffering from adrenal burnout. They're usually more female than male. And because the sympathetic system is constantly, every time there's noise, anytime there's wind, temperature changes, touch, everything, the sympathetic nervous system senses it. And it's part of your fight or flight. But on the other hand, your parasympathetic modulates and tries to temper the sympathetic response and give you a chance to figure out, is it a problem or not? If it's a problem, the fight or flight concept. But we don't have the bear anymore and the fight or flight problems. But what we have now is all of these stimulative assaults on the body, from static electricity to electric fields to noise to wind. They're all electromagnetic. Everything is electromagnetic, especially noise and loud music, anything like that. So, but anyhow, I'm getting on. You are going to edit some of this out, I hope.
No, it's actually really interesting, Clint. So, just to confirm, then, you obviously, basically, your working hypothesis at this stage then was that it was more about grounding as opposed to EMFs.
Yes.
Okay, and I assume by this stage your issues of chronic pain and sleep had improved?
Well, what happened was when I first, at the bus, when I was watching the bus stop and I saw all these shoes and stuff, I immediately kicked my shoes off myself and I just put them on the ground, and I did sense that I felt a little better. So I went, but after I started measuring the EMFs, what I did is I went to a store and I bought a roll of 2 or 3 inch wide metal, aluminum metal duct tape, and I just taped it on my bed. I connected it with an alligator clip to a wire to a ground rod out the window, and I did the same with the meter. And then I would lay on the bed, lay on the tape, and I was grounded. The reading would go to 0, so I knew I was at earth potential. I knew I was grounded. The first night that I did that, I was playing with the meter lying in bed, and I went to sleep. And I woke up in the morning, and the meter is laying by my side. What's unique about that is I was, a 54-year-old cowboy. I had skiing injuries, tennis injuries, back surgery, and just, the typical 49, 50-year-old guy that never took care of his health very well. And so I had lots of pain, and I lived on Advil and black coffee. To go to sleep, I normally had to take an Advil or some kind of a sleeping agent. But anyhow, I went to sleep, and then the next night it was quite similar. As long as I was grounded, I just kind of went to sleep. So I immediately went out and started grounding a couple of my friends, and one of them had arthritis. He experienced the same thing. After a few days, he said, "Do you think this could have anything to do with arthritis?" I said, "No, I don't think so." But he said, "My pain's way down." Then I realized my pain was almost gone. And so then I got very excited, and I started to try to do research. And I went, back then we had the internet, AOL, not very good service and not much bandwidth. And there was not much information available on anything, but I kept searching on grounding. What are the health effects of grounding? And there was nothing in the literature. Could find nothing. Only later, many years later, did we find that over in Europe, back in the 1800s, there were several people who were making the similar claims about grounding the body for improved sleep or health, and in France. But anyhow, in the current literature, then I would go down to the medical universities down in Tucson, at the University of Arizona. Nothing. I couldn't find anybody to help me. And so I ended up going out to California, and I wanted to do a sleep study, do something, study this, because nobody was aware of it. And they pretty much thought I was nuts. And but anyhow, yes, my health, that's what kept me going. 20 years ago, I started this 20 years ago. I'm 76 now, 75 now, going on 76. Anyhow, at 49, 50, I had more pain in my body. You would think I'd been run over by a semi. Today, I have no pain whatsoever, but I'm grounded pretty much 16 to 18 hours a day. I sleep grounded. I have grounded floors. I have whatever. And so I have to walk my talk, of course. But anyhow, so the main thing, when we discovered that grounding reduced pain, in the beginning, we assumed that it was just exposure to electric fields and these environmental stressors. But one day I ran across Stephen Sinatra at a medical conference, and I told him what we were doing. He says, "Clint," he says, "if you're affecting pain, then you need to be researching inflammation, because you can't have pain unless you have inflammation first. Pain is a byproduct of inflammation. Inflammation is the body's being oxidized. It's on fire." Now, back in 2002, this was not common knowledge, because the word inflammation was not even in the common literature. And so I eventually ran across a paper where they were talking about oxidative stress and inflammation. And as soon as I saw the word, they call them radicals, reactive oxygen species. And so I looked at that word, and I knew reactive meant that it was an electrical event, meaning that you have a molecule that is plus or minus electrons. And so then I realized that, okay, how does the immune system really work? I started looking at it, and I learned that if you have a pathogen in your body, or if you have a damaged cell, from tissue damage, from injury or exercise or whatever in life, or just an aging cell that needs to be removed, then what happens is the immune system sends over a neutrophil, a white blood cell, and it encapsulates that damaged cell, and it releases reactive oxygen, which is kind of like acid, and these reactive oxygen molecules, they rip electrons from the cell or the pathogen And that's how, excuse me, that's how the immune system destroys pathogens and damaged tissue, damaged cells. And I thought that was kind of bizarre, but anyhow, so I started to look at the immune system from an electrical viewpoint. And then in thinking things out, we could take any person, if they had an arthritic flare or injury, didn't matter what it was, and we would put an electrode patch on it, connect it to a ground wire, connect it to a ground, and within 5 to 10 minutes, the pain was gone. It didn't matter if it was right after surgery. It didn't matter what kind of pain it was. And so then we said, okay, how can this possibly be? Then we started to realize that inflammation, why do we have inflammation? Why is the body not taking care of this normally like it would have, in previous years? Inflammation-related health disorders. They barely existed in the 1950s. Back in then, 80-90% of the visits to a practitioner were for infectious disease, childbirth, and acute injury. Today, 90% of the visits to a doctor are for an inflammation-related health disorder, stress-related health disorder, meaning the immune system is compromised. And so, anyhow, we started looking at it. And then again, I'm a cowboy and I look at everything. I use cowboy logic. I could go on about that, the cows in the pasture and the horses and whatever. But so anyhow, we started looking, and then we realized that, okay, when the immune system releases these reactive oxygen molecules, they will destroy the pathogen or the damaged cell. But in many cases, there are remaining radicals. And so they are not going to last more than a few nanoseconds before they steal an electron from the closest available thing, which in this case would be another cell. So what happens is you have collateral damage. So the immune system is cleaning up what it would normally do, doing exactly what it would normally do, but there's a remainder of radicals, and they're going over and damaging an adjacent cell. So you have a chain reaction. You have collateral damage. And then this goes on, and it goes on and on and on. It can last years, or it can just flare up into a major event. And so then when we started recognizing that we put a patch on somebody, we ground them, that pain, any pain that's caused by inflammation, the pain automatically stops. So then we looked at it from just simple physics of, well, we're pouring water on a fire. And this is just like burning a log. So when the log's on fire, you throw water on it, put the fire out. So in this case, what we were doing, you have to know that, first of all, the Earth itself has a negative surface charge, anywhere from 20 to 50 millivolts negative, meaning an abundance of free electrons that are able to rapidly move and reduce charge. Mm-hmm. It's like lightning in the clouds. What that is, that's an electrical event where there's a positive charge, and then the Earth is negative, so electrons will well up on the Earth, and then there'll be a lightning fissure in the plasma that opens up, and then electrons go back and forth and reduce the charge in the clouds. Well, the same thing happens in our body, in our cells, everything. So, but anyhow, we didn't know all of this, but we just kind of pasted it together. So one day, but anyhow, so that was our concept. We knew that it had to do with the Earth's free electrons. When you're at Earth potential, your body is negatively charged like the Earth itself. And just common sense told us you can't have inflammation. You can't have charge in a grounded object or a grounded body. You can't have charge on a grounded refrigerator. You can't have charge in a grounded carpet or a grounded computer.
Yeah, Clint, I've heard you say that you can't have inflammation when you're grounded, but I find it unbelievably hard to imagine if you're in chronic pain and then all of a sudden it just goes away. But that's what you've seen in your research.
You haven't been grounded yet, have you?
Not yet. I'm about to be, though.
Okay.
I've just ordered a grounding mat from you, actually, so I'm waiting for that and some patches. So
yeah. I usually want people to be grounded before I carry on a conversation, because it's unbelievable. This is absurd. How could it possibly be? We have this whole world of the healthcare world, the all the medical institutions, all of the best drugs, the best nutraceuticals, and we do have the best food, except a lot of people can't afford it because it's too expensive. But we have all these resources, but everybody's sick and getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And so so there's something that we're all missing, or that the world has missed. And but to give you an idea, if you have, and I know this from the animal world, just paint a little picture here. Animals who live in the wild, they don't have inflammation. They don't have any of the modern health disorders that humans suffer from. They don't have cancer. They don't have cardiovascular disease. They don't have lupus, MS, and so on. On the other hand, all of the animals who live indoors with their owners, they manifest the same health disorders as their owners, and 50% of them die of cancer just like their owners. So it's an environmental issue, because in the wild, this doesn't happen. Now, I remember I tell a story one time when I was very young, and we were out in a snowstorm checking on some cattle, and there was this one calf that had been laying over there, and the mother was standing nearby bawling, and so we rode over there, and the calf had part of its intestines were actually out of the stomach. It had either been ripped by a fence, barbed wire, or coyote, or whatever, wolf. And so anyhow, my dad jumped off and took his hand, bare hands, and we'd been riding. No, if we weren't clean, nothing. Mm-hmm. So he reached down, pulled the skin out, and pushed the intestines back into the calf. Then he took some plain old thread that out of a saddle bag and sewed it up like you'd be sewing up a tarp. And that was it. And he just left her. There was nothing we could do. We were too far from being able to. We couldn't put her on a saddle and take her back. So we just had to leave it, and we had to get home. So anyhow, we left her, and then a couple of weeks later, we didn't know. I mean, my dad says she'll live or she'll die. Nothing we can do about it. And a couple of weeks later, here's this calf out there running around like any other calf, and she had healed up, and she didn't need any antiseptics. She didn't need any problems, whatever. So anyhow, that always dumbfounded me. Why, if I stubbed my toe, or if one of my brothers got hurt, we had to run him to get the ambulance, or we had to run him to the hospital, and all of this big trauma and drama. And that always kind of puzzled me. And then I've heard people say over the years that, well, animals are different than humans. They don't have the nervous systems that are not like we are. And they're dumb, and so on. And having raised animals my whole life, I knew better than that. They have the same emotions, the same feelings, and the same nervous systems that we have. And so anyhow, here's what we've learned, and this helped me pull it all together, is when you have an open sore, let's say you have a wound. So, and you have a hot burning sensation when you have a wound. And what that is, that's the neutrophils coming over there, oxidizing the damaged cell, the damaged cells, so that healing can occur. And if you are not grounded, that'll turn into what I call the Vicodin pain. This hot, flaring, burning pain. But if you take an electrode patch like you're getting, and you put it near the site of the injury or the wound or the surgical incision, you won't have pain. You'll have that very dull pain, meaning leave me alone, let me heal. But you will not have the oxidative burning pain. And the reason is because the reason you have oxidative burning pain is because you have the neutrophils are going in there and cleaning up the damaged tissue, but they're creating all this collateral damage and damaging more tissue as they clean up the existing tissue. And that is what causes the hot burning. But when you flood the body with free electrons and you ground the body, then the body's got plenty of electrons in the body, between the tissue and the cells and everything. And so now if there's an excess radical, it's absorbed instantly by Earth's free electrons.
Wow. So, Clint, what are the ways that we can ground ourselves apart from becoming, I guess, wild animals or going and living in the wild? You mentioned your patches, and I know that you've given me an affiliate link to that. So, if people go to, is it your website, Ultimate Longevity / Ali.fitness? Ali Fitness, all one
Yes.
word. They can see your products, and I believe get your book as well. But
Yes.
and we can go into those products as well. But just on a more sort of simplistic level, what can people do today to get grounded?
Well, the first thing they need to do is to hold this thing in their mind and try to comprehend it. Then just the number one thing you can do, because it does sound absurd and you will not believe it until you experience it. So the first thing you can do is just go outdoors, take your shoes off, stand barefoot on the earth, sit on the grass, put your bare feet on the grass. And in 20, 30 minutes, you're going to feel like a different human being.
Do you know what's funny about that, Clint? I knew you were going to say that. And I actually have been trying to do this recently. I live in the middle of New York. Uh-huh. And yesterday I noticed as I was walking around with my daughter to all the different parks, it was so hard to find grass because it's all synthetic grass.
Uh-oh.
But well, I'm sure I can find some somewhere. So, I mean, obviously Central Park has got a lot. So
yes.
Okay, so to your point then, 30 minutes of just being on the grass and barefoot.
Yes, and even like in New York, you have a lot of humidity there. And the concrete is on the earth. You know, the concrete sidewalks are a lot of the concrete slabs in the patios and stuff. I guess you're in a high rise. It's a little different. And but anyhow, the concrete sidewalk is grounded.
But if you're in your rubber shoes walking along that sidewalk, you're not going to be grounded.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So what can we do?
Well, you know, the only thing you can do, and that's why, and I have to fill this in a little bit. When we were doing our studies, and we have produced over 20 peer-reviewed published studies, maybe 24 by now. And while we were developing our studies, my initial ambition in this was not to go out and create a product and sell a grounding product to people, because I didn't know. The reason we were involved in this is because we knew there was a problem here, and the more we investigated, the more we found out it was a bigger problem, and that virtually everybody was suffering from it. Because it was in 1960 that we invented the shoe, the rubber sole shoe, the modern synthetic sole shoe. And today, 90% of the people wear it. And 90% of the people have some kind of inflammation going on in their body. But anyhow, so what we did is when we developed our studies, we used patches like you're talking about. And then we also used mats that we had people sleep on, or mats for people to sit on, and things like this. And the people who were the study subjects, they said, well, I want that. You know, the ones who were grounded, they recognized the pain. So they said they wanted it and whatever, or they wanted one for their mom. And so there was an accidental business that evolved around this. And everybody asked for everything: grounded shoes, grounded this, grounded that. And then we backed up because our mission was a little different. So we looked at it and said, what is the one thing we can do for people that will help them more than anything else? And we knew that it had to be something that didn't take it can't be anything extraordinary out of their normal day-to-day living. So we said the best thing we can do is to ground people during sleep or while they're sitting during work. And because they don't have to do anything, it's like the bed pad. You put it on the bed under the sheet, cover it up, and you lay down. You're grounded. You come home next night, lay down, you're grounded. Putting a mat on the floor, being barefoot, that's not something most people will do at work. But having a mat on the desk where you have your hands on the mat is very effective, especially for preventing carpal tunnel and those kind of things. So those are the two products that we developed and made available, and they're like the Model T Ford. They're get any color you want as long as it's black, but it does work and get you where you want to go.
And Clint, just based on those products too, I've got to ask a bit of a question. I assume there's a bit of a caveat there in terms of where you live and the electricity in your house, because when I ordered those, I had a comprehensive discussion with one of your staff, and they actually talked me through what type of electricity I have, especially being in a high level apartment. And apparently in New York, a lot of the buildings are older and they don't actually have grounded electricity and that sort of thing. So it turned out that as I was in a new building, it's going to all be okay. But can you just explain that for people?
Yes. Many of the older homes and older buildings back in the 40s and so on, we didn't have ground. Nobody installed ground. You have a 2-wire system. And but in the 50s, after they've had some of the fires and so on, then they started putting in grounding systems and metal clad in the conduit, especially for anything over 3 stories high. And so anything built for sure after 1960 is grounded. Anything built between the 40s and 60s, some of them are grounded, some of them are not, depending on what city, what county, what state you live in. And so it's all over the place. But that's why if you do not have an electrical ground, then one option is to have an electrician install one where you need it. Sometimes that's impossible if you're on the 13th floor of an old building. So what they do there is sometimes they'll connect it to the cold water pipes. That's all they can do, and then install an outlet somewhere. But so some people are not going to be able to get grounded unless they use cold water pipes or
they go outside and spend some time on the grass.
Yes. And the thing that we've found, you have to recognize, like in the animal world, these animals are grounded 24 hours, 24/7. They don't have inflammation. They can't have inflammation. The only ones that do are like horses. You put them in stalls, put rubber mats in the stalls, and then they develop all of the modern health disorders. But put them out in the pasture and then they recover.
So, Clint, you mentioned grass. What about other things like sand, water? What other things ground us?
Well, anything, the earth itself, bare earth, grass on the earth, anytime there's earth with something that will grow, it has enough moisture content in it that a plant or a weed will grow, that's well grounded.
But concrete isn't in that summary, but however, concrete also grounds you, right?
Yeah, concrete is earth. It is made of earthen materials, and it's laying on the earth, and it holds moisture. So it would be like damp sand or damp soil.
Okay.
So, but it is effective. The problem is you can't find a clean spot or quite enough spot or it's challenging to do that.
So presumably then beaches like the sand and water, so I guess salt water would be quite grounding.
Yeah, salt water is perfect. Pure water is not conductive. But you put water on soil, then it's extremely conductive. So it's a challenge, and that's what the dilemma is here. And the thing that I work on is, okay, this if inflammation is because our immune systems are so challenged that the body can't maintain normal health because of this oxidative stress, and then it can't perform its normal duties. We have no option. We have to find ways to bring Earth's potential into our living environments, either carpets, shoes, flooring, bedding, anything, sitting, walking, sleeping, And so that's the new thing that will come in the next few generations. But today, the only thing you can do is, and in many cases, I tell some people, really, if your health is really compromised and you do some experimental grounding and it helps you, then you need to consider finding a living environment that is more supportive of your health. And that's nearly impossible for some people, but on some people they can do that. But anyhow, am I on point here?
Yeah, absolutely. And Clint, I would love to get your advice on grounding shoes. I know you haven't gone down that track, and I know there are a lot of companies out there, and I'm sure some better than others. So I actually know I think it might be called Runners Earth Runners or something like that. I've heard them talk about you, and your company actually, or you yourself, inspired them to make the shoes. Have you got any opinions on any brands or the shoes in general?
Well, the shoes, I mean, what I did maybe 10, 12 years ago, I wanted to introduce the concept to people. So I ordered 2 container loads of rubber flip-flops, the real rubber flip-flops. And then we had them modified so that they had a grounding member in them. And I took them it was with David Wolf and his longevity conferences. They sold all of those shoes in just a matter of weeks. And then everybody came back and said, well, we want them different colors. We want bling. We want this. We want that, and whatever. And I said, that's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to show you that you have a problem, and here's a simple solution. And we do need grounded shoes. It's not something that I wanted to focus on because it's a different kind of, that wasn't my motive here. And I've encouraged many people. We've talked to everybody from Nike to you name it. And many of the shoe companies, like some of the folks at Nike, they said, well, when people come into our stores and they ask for a grounded shoe, then we'll provide grounded shoes. But we're not going to make them now and put them out there because nobody will buy them. And so that's the dilemma that's going on there. Now, there are lots of grounded shoes. If you Google ESD shoes, electrostatic discharge shoes, or anti-static shoes, this is a huge industry. People who work in software factories, chips, medical, dynamite, gasoline, a lot of these people wear grounded shoes. So this is something that's very common. The problem with a lot of it, a lot of them are more work related, but they do have a lot of athletic type shoes. There's 2 kinds. One has a steel toe because of OSHA and the work environments, and another has a soft-toed shoe. The one that I recommend the most for people who are aggressive about going out and wanting to be grounded, I suggest to go to Reebok, and they do have the best soft-toed anti-static shoe. There are many other companies that have them.
Do you know what that's called, Clint?
The Reebok shoe?
Yeah.
Just go to Reebok shoes and then look up conductive shoes, electrically conductive shoes, or anti-static shoes.
Okay, I'll put that one in the show notes for people. And what about some simple flip flops? Are there any out there? What do you think of Earth Runners and others?
Well, the Earth Runners, they don't have enough ground in them for me, but they're better than nothing. Plugs is another company that did something similar to what I was trying to do originally, and they've had some success with it, but it's the grounding members are a little hard. A lot of people complain about it, but they do have one. But just if you Google grounded shoes, there's a plethora of people out there, but the ones, it's coming, and there are lots of people trying to figure it out, but it is already a big industry. It's just getting them to showing the shoe companies that we want grounded shoes, but we want them in more stylish designs.
And I'm assuming your grounding mat would, over 8 hours of lying there, would be more beneficial than grounding shoes.
Well, the problem with grounding shoes is they're only going to work if you're standing on the earth or on the sidewalk. They're not going to work if you're on a carpet or on a non-conductive floor. So that's why I never put a lot of energy into the shoe. I said the most important thing I can do is give them a period of time that they can really be grounded, and that is during sleep, because during sleep that's when 90% of the recovery. That's your recovery period. That's when the body heals and restores itself. And so that's why we focused on sleep.
So, Clint, in summary, I think you made a good point that until someone actually does this, it's very hard to believe. It just sounds too simple to be true. Yet, if you read all the peer-reviewed studies, there's obviously amazing science behind it. Plus, the Earthing movie really, made it true for me. So I really appreciate putting that in the, I know it's going to be for a limited time. I'm going to put that in the show notes for probably 1 to 2 weeks where people can actually watch it. So I recommend people jumping on that and watching it because it's absolutely groundbreaking, excuse the pun. And then obviously I'll put a link to your site with my affiliate code. And what just on I guess in summary, is there anything that you can share with our audience, maybe in relation to exercise and athletes and the benefits?
Well, you can. That's a whole show all by itself.
I know.
It starts with. I mean, we've grounded hundreds of the elite athletes of the world, and the Tour de France. We grounded the U.S. Postal Team and the Discovery Team for 7 years in a row, and I mean they're everywhere. Aaron Rodgers, you name it, they're out there. I mean, now grounding is not talked a lot about. The athletes don't talk about it. It's kind of like a lot of them. It's one of their secrets. They kind of keep it to themselves. But anyhow, what we've spent, well over $1 million doing research on delayed onset muscle soreness. And the first study we did on that was up in. First of all, everybody needs to know that anybody that exercises, doesn't matter who you are, if you just go out and do yoga, you're going to create muscle damage and tissue. All the issues that go with that, and then your blood's going to get thick and sticky after you get exercising, and so your circulation isn't as good, and so and then in 3 days you're going to be sore, especially if you're a newbie. You're going to be so sore sometimes you won't be able to walk, and then you quit going to yoga or you quit going to exercise. So what happens is when you're grounded. What we learned, first of all, I'll try to keep this short, but the mechanism of action in grounding, what we learned was, and credit Dr. Sinatra and Dr. Chevalier with this, we measured blood. We took people, drew blood. This started in Essex, Connecticut. We took a dozen medical docs. We drew their blood, looked at it under a microscope, and almost everybody's blood had some rouleau formation, meaning it was thick and kind of sticky. I mean, the blood cells stuck together. And then we grounded each one of them for 30 to 40 minutes and drew the blood and looked at it again. And every single one of them, the blood it dispersed. And the red blood cells were perfectly around, and they were spacing between each one.
Yeah, there's a great description on the video about this as well.
Yeah. So what we learned was that when you ground the body to the earth, the earth negative, then the body becomes negative, but the red blood cells, we increase the negative surface charge on red blood cells by a factor of 2.7. That's huge. And and so what happens is now that the blood cells are negatively charged, they can't stick together. It's electro repulsion, like two little negative magnets. You push them together, and they will push each other apart. So now your red blood cells can't stick together. When you are grounded in nature, like the wild animals, you can't have thick, sticky blood. Now, everybody that exercises, especially with tennis shoes and in environments where the floors aren't grounded, your blood is going to be thick and sticky afterwards. So what we did is we went up to Eugene, Oregon, with Dick Brown. He's a trainer for Olympian runners, and works with Nike and all those kind of people, but this wasn't involved with Nike. So we started, he would go and, take healthy young 20-year-olds and put them through some paces with some eccentric exercises that would design to create enough inflammation in their bodies that they should not be able to walk in 3 days, because that's the only way we could legally create inflammation in the body so we could monitor the effects of grounding. So what we found was first of all, these people were grounded one at a time. They were in the same room. We drew blood twice a day. They took MRIs. They did everything. So it was a complete profile on what goes on in the body. But anyhow, the individuals who were grounded developed little, if any, inflammation. And the inflammation disappeared more quickly. But the people who were not grounded, they suffered all of the normal pain and all of the elevated inflammation markers like elevated neutrophils, all of these things, depletion of their bilirubin. I mean, these studies are available on the Earthing Institute, and there's several of them. There's one that was just done in Salisbury, the University of Salisbury in Austria. So this is really catching on now, the athletic results. But anyhow, so the main thing is very simple. If you go out and exercise and you do not ground yourself afterwards, you're going to be doing a lot of damage, creating a lot of inflammation into your body. On the other hand, if after you exercise, you go and get grounded for even 15 to 30 minutes. I remember Richard Quick up at Stanford, as soon as he got involved with this, then with the swimmers and stuff, he would make them, and even though the pools were grounded, he would take them before and afterwards, and he would have them run, stand on the grass, and the other runners, they would run around the track on the grass for 15 minutes prior to running on the tracks or doing their lap swimming. So, and then afterwards you make them run again 15 minutes and I said, this is just like riding a horse. You got to walk them out and get the inflammation out of their bodies before you put them away. And so there's a big body of evidence on all of this. It's very real. And these are all high profile researchers. Dick Brown was one of the top. He's no longer with us, but his dying day, his mission was trying to get this information out to the athletic world.
And Clint, I've got to thank you again for doing the same because, without people like you, we wouldn't be finding out about things like this. So I'm so privileged to have you on the show. And before I let you go, I've just got to ask you a question we ask all the guests on the show, slightly random. Do you have a tattoo?
A tattoo?
Yeah.
No, I do not.
I had to ask because I ask everyone, and I thought you may even have like some sort of grounding tattoo that you've implanted into your body or something, but no?
No. If there was something that simple, I would have it.
Very good. Look, thanks again for coming on and for sharing all this, and I can't wait to share the amazing movie.
Yeah, and if you have any questions on any of it, let me know. But the movie kind of says all.
Totally.
And yeah, so then we just leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. I appreciate it. Take care.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ally.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.